Hello again, friends and neighbors. In today's video we're going to be talking about Phalaenopsis orchids, which is one of the most common species of orchids that you'll find in most big box stores. Lowe's, Home Depot, Walmart sells them, some drugstores sell them. They're very common, they're very easy to get a hold of, and they're one of the easiest orchids to actually grow. And in my recommendation, if you're somebody who really wants to try to grow an orchid, get yourself a Phalaenopsis and start from there. And hopefully this video will actually help you kind of start your journey growing orchids, and will make it a lot easier and a lot more enjoyable. So first of all, let's explain exactly what a Phalaenopsis orchid is. It's an epiphyte, which means that in nature they grow attached to the sides of trees. Now this one I actually attached to a block of wood and actually have it hanging on the wall. This is it'll have a white flower when it blooms. During the spring and summer I hang this outside because my indoors I don't have enough humidity, so I have to water this one quite a bit more than others. But this is just to illustrate that in nature, these orchids actually grow attached to trees. They're not parasites. They don't take anything from what they're attached to. They simply use it as structure. And this is a fine example of that. This, as I said, I have to water it a lot more, but they're accustomed to being dry, for long periods of time. Short periods of lots of wet, moisture, rain, that sort of thing, and then extended periods of being dry. They actually require being dry, which leads us into our first sort of care tip. The watering of an orchid, it depends on a few different things. The medium that it's planted in and the type of pot that it's planted in. Now if you have it planted in just a standard plastic pot, it may stay dry, it may stay wet longer, whereas I actually prefer to use these pots that actually have holes in them, and they come in different shapes and sizes and different designs. This is that kind of pot. You can see it's got all the holes in it. You also have these that are more of a basket. They have a bunch of holes. Here's a smaller one. These are good if you're somebody who tends to overwater. These pots will help you kind of keep from causing rot in your plants, because they will dry out very quickly, which they need to do. They need water, and they need to dry out fairly quickly and stay dry for a little bit before you water them again. Orchid roots, because they are epiphytes, evolved to cling to surfaces, but they also serve two other functions for Phalaenopsis orchids. One, they help take in nutrients, but they also photosynthesize, so they're able to produce sugars from sunlight, which is one of the other reason I like clear pots, because the light that I have them growing underneath can actually penetrate the pot and actually help out a little bit. But because they evolved this way, again, they like to be wet, they soak up all the water they can, and then they like to dry out for a good while. So with my orchids, what I do is about every 2 weeks, I'll put them in the sink, and I will I got a large bowl that I put a little bit of fertilizer in. This is 11-35-15. It's just a standard all-purpose water soluble. Well, this is the bloom enhancer. 2014-13 is this just standard orchid fertilizer. Now I dilute this. The package says a teaspoon per gallon. So what I do is I've got a bowl that holds maybe a gallon of water, and I put half a teaspoon, sometimes a little bit less. You don't want a real strong solution. So every other watering, I will dunk them in a pot or a bowl of water, and I'll put this in there, and I'll wait till it stops floating, till it sinks to the bottom. Then I will immediately pull it out, let it drain, put it on a rack. I have a dish rack that I have over one side of my sink. I let it drain till it stops dripping, and then I put it back underneath the lights where it can get proper airflow and get proper lighting, and it dries out. And I let it dry, leave it dry over a week. The next watering, what I'll do is I put it under the sink and just flush the pot with nice clean water, and it's just regular tap water. These plants can take that. And I flush the pot, which flushes any of the residue of any salts or anything like that out of the substrate, and then I will take some bloom booster. If the plant is in flower, I will take some of the better blooms, which again mixed very weak in solution, and I will simply spray the plants. Leaves, roots, everything. I don't soak them, I just give them a nice misting of this, and so far that seems to do quite well. One thing you need to worry about is that these orchids are monopodial, meaning they actually produce a single stem that they grow from, and you need to be careful not to get too much moisture down in the crown of the plant, because it can cause it to rot, which is actually what happened to this one. You can see it started growing on offset. Well, the original, and I can't really show you this, but the original stem was right here. It got some moisture, too much moisture in the crown, and it rotted. Well, it created an offset here, and then it created an offset a little bit lower. So they can recover from it, so don't fret if it happens to you, but just take note of that, and be aware that if you get too much excess moisture that sits in that crown, it can cause rot. Okay, let's go back to the pots for just a second. You know, I showed you these pots, and for me and in my experience, this is the way to go for your Phalaenopsis orchid. It'll make sure they dry out and stay dry for get enough airflow through the roots and all that good stuff. But it's not exactly necessary. If you don't have access to something like, I bought this at Lowe's, I ordered these on Amazon. But if you don't want to spend the extra money, you can use just a standard plastic pot. It doesn't even have to be plastic. It can be ceramic, or it can be glass. As you can see here with this old wine bottle that I actually cut the top off and cut the bottom out of. This one needs water even less. This one doesn't dry out quite as fast. So I can only water this about once every 2 weeks. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll put something, I'll set this on top of something like this, so that it can actually get air into the bottom. So far, it doesn't seem to be that much of a problem. The roots are still nice and healthy. It seems to be growing okay. But if you're just starting out, go with the easiest thing, the best thing, and which in my opinion is these pots that have the holes in them that will allow them to dry out properly. All right. So the next thing we need to talk about is the medium that you plant them in. Now, I use long fiber sphagnum moss for all of my Phalaenopsis. Now, there are countless numbers of mixes and substrates and mediums that you can plant orchids in. There's clay pebbles, there's expanded clay pebbles, then there is this moss, then you have wood chips, and there's different mixes of wood chips and cocoa fibers and all of that kind of stuff. And any of it really will work, but you will have to adjust the care for each one. Some dry out quicker, some dry out quicker, some hold too much moisture, some stay too wet too long. They all will work. It just depends on your personal preference, and I don't have much experience using any of the other mixes because, like I said, I've always just used regular sphagnum moss for most of my orchids, really, and it works just fine. But it's just personal preference. Whatever you want to plant your orchids in probably will work okay. But just as long as you let them dry out in between each watering and you give them plenty of airflow, whatever you plant them in, as long as it doesn't stay wet too long, should work just fine. Alright, so let's talk about lighting. Lighting is one of those things that's a little hard to explain because everybody's lighting situations are a little bit different. Now, I don't have enough natural light that comes in any of my windows in my home, so I have grow lights everywhere. I'll put a link in the description to this particular kind of grow light, but I bought these on Amazon. They're full spectrum. They weren't even the most expensive lights that you can get. You get 6 of them in a pack for like $70. And they're long, fluorescent-like, but they are LED. Phalaenopsis orchids are on the lower end of the spectrum of light requirements. They can take quite a bit lower amount of light than most other orchids, but you have to understand that low light does not mean no light. If you have a space in your home where you want to put an orchid, sit in the spot as close to where you want to put the orchid and try to read something. Not on your phone, obviously. A book. Try to read a book or something. If you can't comfortably read in the amount of light and the space has to provide, more than likely it does not have enough light to sustain an orchid. Even though they're low light, they still kind of like a bright light. So, you know, in front of a nice sunny window, with sheer curtains. You don't ever want to put orchids in full light, full sunlight, at least not Phalaenopsis orchids. There are a few that actually prefer it, but Phalaenopsis orchids or moth orchids do not require full sunlight, but they do still enjoy a decent amount of light. And that will also affect your watering. The brighter the light you give the plant, the more efficiently the more it will use the water, because the more growth is going to occur. It's going to use more water, it's going to dry out faster. So if you have it in a highlight setting, it's probably going to need to be watered a little bit more frequently than something that's in like complete shade. That's just something to be aware of, and unfortunately it's impossible for me to tell you a watering schedule because I don't know what your specific environment is. It's something you will have to figure out on your own. But just remember, let it dry out in between each watering, give it bright light, and occasionally every other watering give it a fertilizer of some kind. It can be natural organic fertilizers, it can be water soluble fertilizers like this. I've even seen people put in slow release pellets in the substrate, and supposedly that works for them. I've never tried it, but it could be something that might work for you. And really, you can plant them in anything, so long as they're able to dry out fairly quickly. I've got four specimens here. This one's the flower's not quite open yet. I said this is a white flower. This is actually a dwarf species or miniature species, and as you can see, I had it growing on a stick. It was doing okay, but it just wasn't retaining enough moisture. It was staying dry too long, so I went ahead and put it in this pot, and it flowered for me. You see how small those flowers are? Now, these are on the smaller side flower scale wise, because there are varieties of these orchids that produce just humongous flowers. I have one, it's not even remotely in bloom yet, but and you can see the structure of the flower, how different they are. These are a little bit more pointed, whereas these are a little bit more round. And also the color is just fantastic. I'm not a huge fan of pink, but this is absolutely beautiful. As you can see there. Now, when an orchid blooms, when it's done blooming, the best thing to do is take the bloom spike and cut it back just above the second scale, which that's a potential growth spot. Sometimes they'll produce babies from these. But if you'll cut it back just above the second bloom spike, you give it the opportunity then to rebloom from the same spike as this one has done here. Not only did it rebloom from the old spike, it was happy enough and produced a brand new spike. And this is just absolutely beautiful. And again, you know, these things sort of thrive on neglect. If you pay them too much attention, they kind of get spoiled, and people generally, when they pay too much attention to the orchids, they wind up overwatering them and they cause them to rot. So don't be a helicopter parent. Water it every time it gets dry, bright light, fertilizer every now and then. Nice airflow, not strong airflow. You don't want like direct airflow, but I have a ceiling fan in my living room that just lightly moves the air in the room that they're in, and it seems to do just fine. The lights are on a 12-hour cycle, so they're on for 12 hours, off for 12 hours. It's winter. During the summer, I'll probably kick it up about 14 on, but that's if you're trying to use grow lights. If you're just using natural light, don't worry about it. Mother Nature will take care of it. Well, I think that pretty much covers it. I'm sure I'm forgetting something. I always do. I never remember everything, so I'm sure I'm forgetting something, but I think I'm going to leave it there. Thank you very much for watching. I hope this helped you somehow. If it did, great. If it didn't, I'm sorry. I'm human. I'm not perfect. I look forward to seeing you in the next one, and I sincerely hope that everything's going well wherever you are, wherever you find yourself in life. Stay tuned for more videos. It's been a while since I've posted one, so this is a lot has changed since the last time I posted videos, but you know, that's neither here nor there. But Anyway, without further ado, I sincerely thank you for watching the video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.